Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, e buonasera, Lazio world. Welcome to our emergency pod. I'm your host, Sean McIntosh, joined by Caleb Adams. We are here to talk about the return of Mister Maurizio Sarri. Back again at Lazio, the coaching carousel in Serie A continues. More news today with Simone Inzaghi leaving Inter after a brutal loss in Champions League. Again, this carousel in Serie A continues to move. We see maybe the craziest offseason I can recall. I mean, all but one team in the top 8 sees themselves with a new manager this year. It's wild stuff, Caleb, but we're here to talk about our beloved Biancocelesti. Maurizio Sadi is back. Quick, and then we'll dive in. Gut feelings.
Gut feelings are, when your stomach is kind of feeling kind of funny. You don't have a stomach ache, but it's just kind of off a little bit, but you're still good. That's kind of how I'm feeling, but leaning more towards like, hey, at least I don't have diarrhea right now.
Okay. Well, welcome to all of our listeners, new listeners. Shout out to Angelo Ferrante on YouTube. Buonasera, he says. It's an emergency. Smoke in your eyes. Honestly, kudos to Lazio's social team. Really nice job announcing the signing, the smoke, the door. Thought they did a really nice job. It's look, man. At least we get some cigarette vibes, old school Italian, maybe some espresso on the sidelines with this appointment. But let's dive in. Quick look at Sadi's first run with the club. He joined the team in 2021 for the 21-22 season. Saw his first full campaign finish in fine fashion. 5th in the table, 64 points. We scored 77 goals in league play and allowed I quite recall, like the issue being how many goals we conceded, 58 goals conceded, but it was a side that was a really good attack. It was also the last time we saw prime Ciro. I remember a lot of the questions, a lot of the skeptics. Hey, how would Ciro Immobile do in a 4-3-3? He's so accustomed to Inzaghi's system where he has that attacker next to him, Joaquin Correa. He's got all the support, but in a 4-3-3, never worked for the national team. Well, Ciro Immobile, another brilliant campaign in his first season under Sadi. Year 2, we saw a strong second season, despite Ciro Immobile being injured. And that was the first signs of Ciro kind of cracking and seeing some of his age. But despite that, 74 points, second in the table, 60 goals for, 30 goals allowed. A fantastic job in clogging up and shoring up the defense. And then we come to the final year in Sadi's first shout with us, and he doesn't make it through the campaign. We ultimately finished the 23-24 season 7th in the table, 61 points, 49 goals for. You see that massive drop year over year in what the attack looked like. Only 39 goals against, but he did leave when we were in 9th. So Tudor coming in, kind of fixing some things and a little bit of the new manager bump. Tudor really good and seems to be really good now at that. And maybe that's his niche. I don't know why he's not getting hired as a full-time manager. I can only speculate. He's not easy to work with, but just like he did with Juve this year, comes in, gets a job done, did the same when Sadi kind of left. And important to note, because I hear a lot of folks saying, well, Sadi was fired. Why would he come back? Again, for folks that weren't kind of in the thick of things, Sadi was not fired. He willingly resigned. A big reason for his departure was just not seeing that group of players as kind of fit to move forward with. Saw that he, true to his words, always said that if he felt like he was the problem and that he couldn't get a job done, he would walk away, and he did so. And so here we are, Caleb, back with Sarri after only a season under Baroni. Baroni finishing in 7th, 65 points, 61 goals for, 49 goals allowed. Tell me, what does this mean for Lazio?
I think the first thing this means, and I know that we got already someone in the chat talking about how this is sort of a cover-up maneuver to hide Lotito's failure and sort of appease some of the fans. I actually think this is a positive sign towards Lotito because, yes, he didn't sack him, but he probably didn't support him the way that he should have. And it almost seems as like you know what? You don't realize how good you have it until you lose it, right? And I think Lotito feels that to a degree where, I mean, it was so quick. We didn't even bother looking for anyone else. There were some names thrown in, but no one was a real contender for this position. So for me, I think it can be a positive sign and trying to transform this club into something bigger than what it is right now, right? Back to where its old standard is at. And I think it is sort of a sign of humility from Lotito to be like, okay, yes, like we're going to do this right this time. So I'm encouraged from it from that perspective. And I think it is sort of again, another sort of sign. And I don't know, the league, Serie A has only been won by 2 non-Italians since like the Soviet Union. And so it's a clear statement of, hey, like we want to win. We want to get back to winning ways. And we want to have one of the top guys doing it.
Yeah, look, I've kind of gone back and forth. I've struggled with this because, and we'll probably touch on both sides of the coin, you know, why we should be positive and maybe some of the negative aspects to it. But I think if I'm strictly right now, if I'm looking at the positives and the things that bring me hope is that for the same reasons I was excited when he was first hired. I go back to because I feel the exact same way. This does signal some bit of intent, right? You don't bring on a manager like Sadi without some sort of desire to win, with something said like Sadi isn't going to accept this without some sort of promise. We know he's somebody that kind of stands on his moral high ground, and you know, this is what he believes and this is what it has to be, or else like I have to walk away. And to Lotito's credit, we often hear of all of the relationships he ruins. No, you got to give him a little bit of a nod here, in that this was a relationship that he didn't burn. And it was at least positive enough where Sadi is willing to come back. Sadi always extremely graceful when it comes to the club, the supporters, the Laziali, the Curva. Always spoke so highly about what it meant to be Laziali and what he saw, and stepping through those doors and hearing the Curva. And so I think he really meant it, you know, and a lot of times it's lip service from a manager, but I think he really meant it, because even when he stepped away, he continued to speak positively about the culture of Lazio. So I think it's a bit of a signal of intent. I think I have to, you know, be positive about how quickly we got this done. We know how slowly Lazio often moves, particularly in the market, but to get this done quickly so that we can move forward and start talking about the market was important. And, you know, you mentioned the Italian piece. I'm excited about, you know, what this means for the transfer market, what this means for some of the players we have. And I think about maybe what some of the differences were in the points of when Sadi came now versus then. I think the last time, the first go around, it was kind of the end of a project, right? He certainly inherited a project, but it was the end of that era. It was, you know, Ciro Immobile, Sergei Milinkovic-Savic, Luis Alberto, all kind of winding down. And so the difference here is this was supposed to be the start of a project under Baroni. And we have young players, new players, less egos, and I am hopeful and excited to see what he's able to do in an entirely different situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is new. It's really like you said it was the end of an era. We thought we were starting a new era with Baroni, right? It was supposed to be a 3-year project, according to the front office, and instead it kind of gets blown up, and we're reverting back to what was originally supposed to be Sadi's project. Like Sadi was still supposed to be here at this stage, I believe, right? I strongly believe the intention was to have him here on a 3 years minimum, right? Build something up like he did at Napoli, give him time, and so I, for one, am also very excited to see how he does with no remains of that old sort of guard. None of those guys are there anymore. This is a fresh squad of players for the most part. Some guys who do have some familiarity with Sadi, which is great. It isn't completely just everyone like, what can we expect from Sadi? Most players, I think, can expect, know exactly what to expect from Sadi. And so I think that also helps in sort of it's not a new, it's not so much a transition, but just sort of like a continuation. Okay, we know what he expects. So when it comes to us playing and that whole like growing pains of learning a style and stuff, I don't think would be so apparent as in Sadi's first season, which was still decent. It was still a decent season for sure. But Sadi definitely has a unique system, demanding system, and is very particular about things when it comes to tactically. So those sort of growing pains won't be as apparent, considering that most of the squad has played with Sadi. But I'm really, really excited to see how both Sadi and Lotito are going into this with new mentalities, right? It's a sort of a new, they're coming in, I think, with new perspectives. From Lotito's side, it's, this is my hope. My hope is both sides see where it didn't really work out the first go around and how can we shift and redirect to make sure it works this time around, right? And for a moment there, it did work. And so, yeah, I'm super excited to see how he does. I still think that Sadi is not working with all that great of a squad compared to a lot of other Serie A rosters right now. But I'm very, very curious, particularly in the transfer market. And just, is this going to be more so of, we're happy with what we got, and let's just, because right now we're seeing rumors of young players, not really any sort of starters. Is Sadi happy with this? It is part of the reason Sadi accepted this project, that he likes these players. Like, does he like this current roster? Does he see potential in this? So these are all questions that I'm very interested to kind of learn more about as we progress to the summer and into the season.
Yeah, I think, look, at the end of the day, it's always going to be about players. It's always going to come down to players. And, if he's not supported, then it doesn't matter who our manager is, right? Like,
Yeah.
it ultimately doesn't matter. And so, again, for me, the hope is that it signals some sort of a commitment. Now, that commitment may not be in the way that we all want, which is new player signings. I think the likelihood is that what this signals and what everything out there, all the rumors, all the journalists, right, that are reporting on this, is that guarantees were made largely by way of what players are going to stay, what this signals for the likes of Romagnoli, Gila, Rovella, Guendouzi, those kind of were the central figures that were named. I think Tati Castellanos was one of the players, and some notable names left off. But I think what this signals is that here's this core, Sadi, that you respect. We'll keep them. But I think we all know and understand the financial situation. Losing out on Europe, Lazio never being one to spend a ton anyways. I think we probably need to all take a step back in terms of expectations on the market. We're not going to go out there and sign a big fish. It's not without a sale, like at all. Now,
well, let's stay right here because I like because that's one positive to this hire, and I think we could definitely discuss a little bit more about is retaining a lot of players that we initially thought were, there's no way they're staying.
Yeah.
Even some, Romagnoli, guys like Guendouzi, who initially came in because of Sadi. Yep. So one player that is, I'm sure very excited, and we saw Guendouzi's best under Sadi really, and in that system. And so I think that's just one sort of positive to this hire, one positive outlook is that while yes, we all want new players, keeping our best players is just as important, particularly when we have some really solid ones. So that's definitely, I think, part of the thought process of bringing Sadi in is if we're bringing sort of a no-name person like Baroni again, these guys are going to stay.
Yeah, and we're not going to get. We're also, if there is any hopes in landing new players for a side that's not in Champions League, not in Europa, not in Conference League, what do we have to offer? I think we at least have a manager that is a well-known commodity, that is respected, that comes with a history of he's won Serie A, he's won Europa League, he's managed in the Premier League, he's obviously managed at top clubs in Italy, so he comes with a bit of respect. So if there are any hopes competing for players within our budget, I think that's another positive too. Of course, keeping our guys, but then any hopes, because I was really worried that we really would have very little to offer anybody competing now with the Torinos, or I think Fiorentina has more to offer right now. So at the very least, we can say, hey, Sarri, right? Like, he's drawn players before. Can he do it again? And many of these players you mentioned, like, the rumors were pretty strong that they were on their way out. Romagnoli, Guendouzi, those two in particular, and Gila as well. Like, a lot of rumors about Premier League squads and La Liga teams after him, but I think Lotito, for all of his faults, he's usually pretty good about keeping our best players. And there is a fault to that sometimes, because I think we don't often sell high when we need to. But I think we're going to at least hold on to this core. On the player front, Caleb, who do you think are the biggest winners? Let's talk players, and then let's talk about in large, like, the big winners of this.
Yeah. So when I was the first thing I go to when it comes to biggest winners from this appointment is the midfield core. One of the biggest issues that I had with Baroni was he was utilizing Rovella and Guendouzi in ways that it isn't really their biggest strength. We've seen Guendouzi at best when he has someone behind him, because Guendouzi sort of likes to float. Many times our goals was conceded because Guendouzi would go out and press wide, somewhere, have no cover behind, and then our center backs are isolated, or our fullbacks are isolated with whoever's attacking on that side. And that was a Baroni issue throughout his tenure that put Guendouzi in bad situations, and I think hindered sort of his ability. Rovella is also someone that when you're playing a two-man pivot, you have to be more of a two-way player, where Rovella has that passing. He very much thrives in a position as a regista where he can sit back, doesn't have to kind of go beyond the halfway line of the field. And so I think our midfield core really benefits a lot from going back to a more traditional 4-3-3 rather than this 4-2-3-1 that Baroni was running. Another player that comes to mind is Delabashiru. Delabashiru came in, and he is someone that is a more of attacking center mid presence, but he's not a full out number 10 like he was being utilized in that 4-2-3-1 under Baroni. So I think someone that could benefit from this would be potentially a Delabashiru, someone that's a more physical presence there. I think combines well in a more attacking 8 role, not so much the 10. So I think our midfield core is going to be a big winner from this appointment, because they're just going to be played in positions and roles that that play to their strengths and gets the most out of them.
Yeah. And I think when I think about some other positives, not playing in Europe this year, particularly with the likes of Sarri, who flamed out of European competition with us. If I'm looking at some of those negatives, like, he flamed out, he didn't do well. We didn't have the squad, we didn't have the depth. He gave his excuses, and this year, look, we're going into a year where we know Rovella and Guendouzi are capable of minutes. At least now, balancing that will be a little bit easier. I think, I'm interested. I think it's a really good point on Dele Bashiru. It will completely change our mercato strategy. Not that it changed it drastically because we were already shorthanded in the midfield, but now we're really going to need to add a couple pieces if we're rolling out a 4-3-3, and what does that look like, and who's that really strong player? I know tons of links this past season with Jacopo Fazzini, and all indications are that Sadi is also really high on that player. It also aligns with everything that Sadi likes. Another young Italian. If I'm adding to the list of positives, want to see more of my Azzurri on Lazio. That was part of the project that Sadi wanted to build up, was a team chock full of Italians. But I think I'm looking at another player that I think is a big winner here. It's Romagnoli. I mean, knowing how much Sadi rates him and how much Romagnoli loves the club, knowing that, look, again, we're just going off of speculation that Lotito maybe did Romagnoli wrong, promises were made, not kept, and knowing how important he is to Sarri potentially making some demands saying, look, we need Romagnoli in here. I think having that faith from that manager. Brief side note on this, just because it's international break, I'm wearing my 94 training top. We've got a huge match, Italy, Norway, World Cup qualifiers. We've got Acerbi pulling out of the national team. Buongiorno's injured. Calafiori is still. We don't know how healthy he's going to be. Injury after injury, players pulling out. Spalletti, what's it going to take to call up Romagnoli?
That's ridiculous.
I mean, my goodness. What is it going to take to call up Romagnoli? Not even in consideration.
That's
this
crazy.
Is Lazio's. You had him as what, your player of the season, an absolutely pivotal part of this Lazio squad. I know it wasn't a great team this year, but he was really, really solid. The guy that captained Milan to a Scudetto. What does he need to do to have any sort of consideration? My word, you're talking about a side that's got to play Erling Haaland, Romagnoli. Maybe he's not the most equipped center back to play against the likes of Rafinha, Lamine Yamal, or pace merchants, but he's the kind of center back that you want against an Erling Haaland, against Norway. Spalletti, please dial the man up. This is getting a little bit ridiculous. So sorry. But yeah, look, I think for on the flip side, so let's say on the positive, outside of players, who else do you see as like big winners?
I think Sadi is a big winner in this situation. I think he's really coming into a win-win scenario for him because yes, because we don't have European football, there might be some additional pressures there in league play, but there's no European. He's coming in with a group of players that in an environment he's already comfortable in. He loves the environment, loves Lazio, loves the fan base. He's coming in also probably with a Lotito that's a little bit more open to maybe bring in some guys that he needs and wants, right? I think Sadi has more leverage in this situation than someone like Lotito does. I think Sadi has a lot of the power in this particular season and his return. And so I think Sadi's a big winner because he's coming in on this project, the decent squad, but at the same time, no European football. He doesn't have to worry about balancing it. He can run the starting 11 every single game, which he loves to do, right? And so I think Sadi's a big winner from this because, and if he doesn't really work out, I don't really think fans are going to blame Sadi. I think fans are going to turn again on the roster itself, on the squad, and say, yeah, I mean, what's Sadi supposed to do like with this team? We right? I don't anticipate Sadi getting more heat than Lotito and the front office and the transfer market, right? So I think Sadi has a lot of leverage here, and so I think he's a big winner here.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's not a losing situation for Sadi. I mean, if it doesn't go well, I mean, come on, like at some point, like we all know, look, some of it's in our YouTube chat, like the problem is always going to start at the top, and our inability to break through where we have years, 13 years before Champions League, when we finally qualified under Simone Inzaghi, and then our inability to retool. We finally make Champions League, and what do? We bring in Vedat Murici, and we have a second place finish under Sadi, and what do? We lose Milinkovic Savic, and we bring in mediocre players, and this season going in, we're riding high under Baroni, and we go into a season without enough midfielders. So we go into a mercato, and what do? We sign 3 players, 2 of which really never see the pitch. One of them in Belayan doesn't get adequate time, and we continue running midfielders into the ground. So, Sadi can come in, and whether it works or doesn't work, the problem at the top is still going to be there, and there just needs to be some sort of a change. And so all we can do is hope, and hope that one of those glimmers, one of those little sparkles that happens every couple years, whether it's a second place finish or it's the 2019-20 magical run before COVID kind of killed everything. We just have to hope for these moments and these seasons that come in sporadically, and maybe Sadi gives us that, and hopefully this changes something for one season without European football. I caution myself a lot of times because I look at this and say, well, look at what Napoli did, but we don't have the roster that Napoli had, right? They brought in McTominay, they had Kavica Kvaratskhelia for the first half of the season, and they brought in, sure, they lose Kim Min, but they bring in Buongiorno, and they've got a really strong lineup. And you got Lukaku with Conte, who is a world-class striker under Conte. And so, unfortunately, like, the parallels aren't necessarily there, except for the fact that we're not playing in European football. So yeah, I think, look, Sadi has nothing to lose. This is a smart bit of business for Lotito, because it certainly makes him look good. Like, it's a name, it's a positive relationship. Like, Sadi, for the most part, everybody's positive about him. And
real quick, I do think that Italo, friend of the channel here, had made a good point in the chat. He said that in Sadi's first stint, Ciro and Alberto were above him in the hierarchy, and I think now Sadi really is the supreme leader, given that the old guard is gone. And that's a great point, because at the end we saw even Ciro turning on Sadi there, and Sadi's like, you know what, I'm not really in control of this ship right now. I need to get out, right? And so I think that's a good point as well. And this sort of backs up what we're talking about. A winner here is Sadi, and really nothing to lose is that he's also coming in as the guy, like the top person. There's no one really on this team that's someone like a Cheeto, right? Someone that's a legend of the club who demands that sort of respect yet. These are guys they're trying to find someone to look up to, it feels like, right?
Exactly. And that's where, I said, it was kind of interesting to see he's coming in at 2 different phases of a quote unquote project, like in how he'll perform, and maybe more of an imprint on what this side looks like. I'm certainly interested to see that. Losers, who do you think are the losers of Sadi coming in?
I think one big loser is gonna be Dia, and the reason is twofold. Number one, Sadi has no idea who he hasn't worked with Dia. When Tati came in, it was under Sadi, and Tati got a lot of minutes, and a lot of times he got minutes over a healthy Ciro Immobile. And so when you're looking at the roster right now, you have Noslin, who could potentially play that striker, kind of, who is not Sadi's guy. That's a Baroni guy. You have Dia, and you have Tati. Obviously, Noslин's not even really in contention, in my opinion. It could be he gets newfound life from Sadi. We don't know. But for me,
he was brought in as a striker, and he was not good as a striker. They shifted him in preseason and tried to play him in different roles, which was the first signal that, like, he can't play striker, throw him out on the wing.
Personally, I think he should be a right winger, in my opinion, for me. But anyway, that's another conversation. Regardless, he's not even in the conversation, when it comes to this thing. So Sadi's looking at who's my man, who's my guy up top right now. Tati's number 1 contender for him. He's worked with Tati. Tati has this. I'm not saying for us. I'm sorry. I'm checking out Sadi's
No,
role.
sure.
This is a guy who was benching Cheeto just a season ago, who was older, not as good, but still, I mean, still a decent Cheeto. So I think Dia is a huge loser because not only does he have no sort of rapport with Sadi, he also played in a second striker attacking midfielder type of role all season long. And he's really pretty decently suited to that. We're not playing with that role anymore. His role is gone.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think he is decently suited for that. I think if anything, I mean, we've been claiming and wanting to see Dia more as that striker role. And I think what he does have is the ability to finish his chances. And I'm actually interested to see if there is a battle for that spot. Does Dia outperform? Because look, Tati was not great under Sadi either. The same struggles that he had. If anything, Sadi knows Tati maybe too well to go, I don't know, after a couple managers, like we didn't really see this. Dia may be the option. I'm interested in Francesco Pio Esposito. A lot of links to him as a player. He's a player that put up really, really strong numbers at Spezia this year. Couldn't save them from relegation, but he was a really, really strong player. I know he comes with a decent transfer market fee. I mean, we're talking 25 million euros. So we haven't spent that much on a player in ages, but knowing how critical that role is in general, for every club, but particularly with a Sadi-led team, I would love to see it. It also falls in line with bringing in another young Italian player. But the player I think that's probably the biggest loser for me is Isaacson. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, we need to sell somebody, and of the list of players that we've talked about that have been floated as the guarantees for Sadi, Isaacson hasn't been on any of those lists. I also think that Sadi doesn't particularly rate him that high. In his first year, he wasn't playing Isaacson a ton. We saw glimpses of Isaacson kind of in and out, and he heavily relied on Felipe Anderson. And yes, Felipe was a beast. Game in, game out, game in, game out. But part of not rotating is twofold. It's one, yes, you trust the player, but it also signals a little bit of a lack of trust in the option. And so I think that this is probably not great news for Isaacson, particularly because Sadi needs somebody that's like.
I'm going to completely axe this take with facts.
Okay.
Because I'm going to read you a quote because I don't want to get you too deep into this. But this is no guarantee what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
But this is a direct quote from Fabiani. He said 10 players are considered untouchable by the club. And in that list, he said, the entire quote is, we will have a new coach, but the project with the young players will continue. We have a good foundation. We will not dismantle and reassemble. I will not sell any big names. Mandas, Gila, Romagnoli, Rovella, Guendouzi, Delebashiru, Isaacson, Zaccagni, Dia, Castellanos will remain. The squad will only be trimmed with superfluous departures because 26 outfield players are too many for a single competition. So Isaacson was on that 10 untouchable list. And
yep,
backing up your point, Dia is on that list too. So
yeah. Well, here's why I can't trust this man, because he called them big players. And I see a whole lot of players on that list that should never be referred to.
They're big because players. they paid a lot of money by Lazio standards for them. That's for a lot of these.
Fair. Look, I mean, that means we're not bringing anybody in, right? Like we're talking. I mean, now interesting. Zaccagni wasn't on that list.
No, he was.
Was he? Okay. Yeah. I know he had been linked to Napoli, and there's some rumors that they want him.
I would say some notable names that are not on this list, and I wish I could pull up something here on the screen for people to see that you could also see. But I'm going to throw this list in our private chat, Sean, so you can just kind of review it as well. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
So not on this list for me was that I found interesting was and one of my bigger losers too is Pellegrini. I think Pellegrini is a big loser in this, despite him being a player I really, really loved his game in the second half of the season. He was trending upwards, but we know Sadi did not rate Pellegrini at all. Even in desperate situations, he would not play Pellegrini. And if Pellegrini is not on this list, he's not considered a big player.
Yeah. No, Fabiano Parisi has been a player linked to Lazio as well as a Sadi guy, Italian left back at Fiorentina, has kind of been stuck behind. Gossens comes with a relatively cheap, cheap by everybody else's standards. For us, 5 million euros is not cheap. So
who's also missing?
What's that?
Tavares,
yeah.
On this list. But this is probably a better conversation for the transfer special and stuff. We can maybe go a little dive deeper. I just wanted to throw that in there just for
guys
that we were building around.
I do think if I'm thinking about players and who aren't winners, I think Pellegrini is a really good shout. I do still think in terms of Isaacson and what we saw under Sadi before, knowing kind of what he demands out of that winger role, and You've got. He loves a player like Felipe Anderson. He wants you to go up and down, and he wants you to defend. I don't know if we're going to get that from Isaacson. So, I'll be curious. Here's another loser in all of this. Roma. Is a big loser because I'll tell you what. If we're going to finish in 7th place, we better damn well be winning that derby. And under Sadi, for all the faults, for whatever negativity we want to give, we were dominating the derby. And this year was just unacceptable. To do what we did, and just dominate in that first match. Second match, we were the better team, but we can't come out of it with the result. Roma, for me, is a big loser in this.
That was awesome. I love that. Is one thing that is definitely one of the biggest positives from Sadi's tenure here. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
I think. I can't think of any more sort of glaring winners and losers in terms of players. A lot of just more question marks, really, for a few of them. But very interested to see how that competition at striker goes. I think it's a really interesting position battle. Isaacson as well in that position. Is Nelson going to maybe get a chance to play a right wing? We don't know, but really, really curious to see how this pans out.
Scale 1 to 10, Caleb. 10 being the super positive. You feel great. This is what you wanted. This is the manager. It's going to get it done. 1 being this is a disaster. We got the worst guy we could possibly get. 1 to 10. Where does this appointment, Maurizio Sadi back at Lazio, where does it fall on that scale?
Okay, so we're not doing your scale of 60 is passing.
Yeah,
6 is passing.
So we're gonna. Yeah, so the scale would be. So how do you scale yours? 5 is average.
No, I scale on the way you just said it.
Okay, exactly.
Which is like 1 is just absolute garbage.
Yep.
10 is the best. 5 is
okay.
Meh. I think I'm gonna go with. I feel like I feel more hopeful than I think I should be. I'm gonna give this appointment a 6.
Okay. I think I'm there with you. I think I'm at like 6.5, 7.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I can see 7.
I'm trying to be hopeful. I really am. I'm trying to say, look, here's the positives. This is somebody that knows the situation, that knows what he's getting into. I've been at a lot of places that I would never go back to. And so
that's a good point.
That says something. He understands what he's navigating, and it's still a big name that was willing to come back to Lazio. There's no European football. I am, man, when we lost that final match and I really thought like we put ourselves in a hole, like a 2 to 3 year loss that just really set us back. I don't know that this is going to help us recover, but I think it's one of the few options that hopefully this season can get us back at least like how do we have a fighting chance to get into Champions League, and is there any hope? And it's going to take a lot. It's going to take other teams failing. Maybe that comes with Inter losing Simone and kind of being in shambles. Maybe they're in a different space, and maybe we can see Milan continue to struggle. But I am hopeful that under Sarri we see some things fixed, and at least tactically we can go up against some of these bigger sides, because that was really troublesome for me this year. Is just against every side that mattered in big games, we were just out coached, and we were never really up for it, and it was really disappointing. And again, I did not forget about just how ugly our football was in those last few months with Sadi. Like, I didn't forget. And I am just hoping that a lot of the player issues and some of that were a big part of it. So for me, I'll be super positive and say 7 out of 10. There were other guys I wanted, other managers I would have been a bit more excited for, but it's not a bad option. Certainly not last on the list. And I know Angelo says 4 coaches in 2 years. That gives you what Lotito and Fabiani are made of. Yes, but to be fair, unfortunately, in the world of football, it's in and out. It's every single year, even at great clubs. I mean, at Real Madrid, you're winning a Champions League, and then the next year they're giving you the boot. Unfortunately, that's probably just the chaos of being a manager in football. Don't get me wrong. Lotito we know it's not easy. It's not great. But at least this was a manager that's willing to come back.
And I'll say that the reason I give a 6 is because I tweeted out, I don't love this, but also don't hate it. And I think the positives do outweigh the negatives for the most part. I can think of more. I can glean more positives from this appointment than I can negatives. Whereas it could be very different with Baroni. We had a long list of like potential. Hey, these are kind of some things that we need to look out for. And there was some positives too, but that list was pretty even on both sides of positive negatives. On this, when I'm really listing it out and seeing it, I think there are more positives to glean from this, and that's why it is a 6 and not a 4 for me, because it is just the fact that we could retain all of our players is enough for me to bump it to a 6, in my opinion. And again, just a coach who I know loves the club, can compete tactically with the top coaches in this league. There are games that I can think of where we said Sadi just completely outcoached the other coach. And this is a top 4 team, a top 5 team. I can think of moments where we outplayed opponents because of coaching. I can't think of many of those under Baroni. And so for that, I think it is I think it's a net positive than anything else.
Yeah. And look, it can't end here. The pressure has to continue to be put on. That is my hope, is that Sadi is somebody that's going to come and pressure, because it doesn't matter. Again, you can have Sadi, you can have Pep Guardiola, you can have Luis Enrique. It doesn't matter if Lotito is not supporting, if we're not making the right choices on the player front, and if we're entering a season with 4 to 5 midfielders, it's not good enough. That is shambolic. That is not how a professional club should be run. So none of that matters. We just have to hope that this comes with some sort of guarantees that there's going to be something on the market that fixes this roster, because it is not good enough. And for all the complaints we have about Baroni, and they are justified, like, there were things he could have done. It, quite frankly, was not a good enough side. Like, on paper, we were exactly where we should have been. Fiorentina was better than us on paper. Roma was better than us on paper. Milan, who was behind us, like, was better than us on paper. Like, we weren't a good side. So we have to have a different group of players, and the ultimate equalizer is having a manager that tactically can help offset some of that gap in disparity in player quality. But this was good, Caleb. It's good to have a manager out of the way. It's good to now start talking about the market strategy. It's good that players are kind of floated out there. We'll see if I know. Look, I don't want to be depressed about the about Lotito and who we are and all this. Like, I just want to be hopeful. I want to get excited again. I love this club. Love talking about this club. I love, being torn up about it. And all we can do is be hopeful that something changes and we can have some positivity and we can look forward to the 24-25 campaign. So whether it's Sadi, Pep Guardiola, Luis Enrique, Champions League, Conference League, no European